And it doesn't mean you can't use that method, but don't try and superimpose your preconceived notions into the scriptures. That's something that we in Eastern Orthodoxy do not like. And a lot of Protestants don't like that either, by the way.
We talked previously about the idea that the whole presuppositional method, as far as Van Til put it, he formulated it when he was alive in the 1900s. But before that, we don't really have that type of thinking throughout history, as someone claimed, but also someone claimed that we do. Do you have any thoughts on that as far as the whole presuppositional method and where it originated?
Yeah, so in regards to that question, I'm Eastern Orthodox, so obviously church history is something that's very important to me. And I'm going to show my orthodoxy a little bit here because you're asking for my opinion, so I kind of give it to you. So in Orthodoxy, we have this focus on keeping what's called the phronema, which is the patristic mindset. When we look at the Bible as Orthodox Christians, we're very concerned with understanding the Bible in the way that the apostles understood it, and the early church fathers, the disciples of the apostles, and those that came after them. So this whole idea of arguing transcendentally is a pretty formally a fairly recent thing that started with Immanuel Kant several hundred, a couple hundred years ago, and you have the presuppositional iteration that Van Til formulated in the 20th century AD. Before Van Til, you never see anyone arguing in the way that Van Til argued, like the idea that God's a precondition of intelligibility, and this is not in the way that Van Til argued it. Most early Christians would probably agree that that God is at some way the foundation for all knowledge. But the idea that unbelievers could not have knowledge, which is what some Van Tilians go as far, like the less educated ones and the less, I don't want to insult them, but like the less formally educated ones will go as far to say that unbelievers cannot know anything without God. The church fathers would obviously disagree with that, and even scripture would disagree with that, because you see instances in scripture where scripture acknowledges that the pagans know some things about God. So it's very hard to square that with general revelation as taught in the scriptures. But before the 20th century, you really don't see anything like that. But now, when people are arguing, oh yes, it was before there was, you can see examples of this methodology in the scriptures. Well, the problem you have is it's like the problem that you saw. Did you watch the James White, William Lane Craig debate?
Yeah, what about it?
Okay, so you see kind of the problem that I'm talking about in this debate, because William Lane Craig says, well, Molinism's not really in the Bible, but I think it's the best thing that explains what we see in the Bible. Mm-hmm. Right, James White was affirming that his method of his Calvinism is directly derived from the scriptures. This is kind of the issue that we have here with the Van Tilians, talking about how you can find Van Tilian apologetics in the Bible. Now, if you ask me, I'm going to tell you, you're not going to find it in the Bible. And it doesn't mean you can't use that method, but don't try and superimpose your preconceived notions into the scriptures. That's something that we in Eastern Orthodoxy do not like. And a lot of Protestants don't like that either, by the way. So yeah, I would say that you're not going to find it prior to that. And anyone that tries to argue for it is always reading into the text, because I'll ask them, okay, well, you tell me what tradition in the church that you're getting your interpretation of scripture in regards to Van Tilian apologetics from, and they're not going to be able to find anything prior to the 20th century. And there's also a lot of ambiguity at play too, because when you think about it, a lot of people they confuse polemics with presuppositionalism, right? Because I remember there was a YouTube video, and I don't know if it's still up, but it says that it says William Lane Craig goes presuppositional, and all Craig was doing was asking what the foundation for moral values is in atheism. That's nothing that's exclusive to presuppositionalism. That's just William Lane Craig being William Lane Craig. Asking questions like that, because the apologetic method does not lie in the polemics. It lies in the positive argument for God's existence, which is tag, which is what the Van Tilians ascribe to. Obviously, I think we've established earlier, at least implicitly, that Clark rejected tag.
So as a presuppositionalist, what were your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously you knew that was true, but you were still one. So what was the difference there?
Well, I was a Protestant back then. That was a big difference. And, with Protestants, you had different explanations for this, but Protestantism, obviously, if you're a Protestant, you think that at some point the original tradition of the church was lost, and you're either Protestantism, some form of Protestantism recovered the tradition, or it's in the process of recovering it. So for someone who thinks that the early church tradition was lost and they had to be rebuilt, you really are not alarmed by such recent innovations in theology. So that's why I was not alarmed by that as a presuppositionalist at the time that I was one.
Which, of course, I mean, just to push back a little bit, like as a Protestant, I've heard a lot of people, and I'll be honest, I haven't looked into this, but a lot of Protestants would also say that like there were at least hints, or there was at least one, believing Christian, like all throughout church history. It just might not have been the most popular view or something like that.
My response to that is, where are they?
Okay.
That's my response. Is show me in history where you can trace this lineage. Because as an Eastern Orthodox person, I'm about to show my orthodoxy again. But, we can see in history tangibly where the faithful Christians were for the past 2,000 years. That we can see them in the same ecclesiastical bodies under the same hierarchy of bishops up until this point. So that's what I would ask them if they were to make that claim.
Yeah, but also as a presuppositionalist, you have, it seems to me, and I haven't seen it. I mean, I've asked around, I've looked as far as I can. I haven't seen any. The only claims I've seen of people using presuppositionalists is the claim that it's used in the Bible and the scriptures, and then you don't hear it, you don't see it in history for 2,000 years or 1,900 years. So you don't know anything besides that. So the thing with like Protestantism is you have at least bits and pieces of these views. But with the presuppositional method, like you don't have anything.
Yeah.
Compared to claims from the Bible.
Got you. Okay, yeah. So you're talking. Okay, so what you're saying is you don't really see that parallel that you see with other Protestant traditions, like penal substitutionary atonement and things like that. But with presuppositionalism, you don't have that historical parallel. You just see it pop in the 20th century. That's what you're saying, right?
And is that just something that you never really thought about as a presuppositionalist?
No, I did not consider that point as a presuppositionalist. But if someone mentioned that to me, that probably would have got me to think a little harder.